Hi, I'm David Fleming, and I want to welcome you to the YouTube channel of Disciples Ignited, where we are focused on Jesus, advancing his kingdom, and preparing his disciples. And talking about preparing disciples, I do want to let you know that I have written a series of books on discipleship. They're available on Amazon. It's called the Spirit-Filled Discipleship Series. 3 books. The first book is about how God calls disciples. The second book is about how God prepares disciples. And the third book is about how God reveals disciples. You can use them as an individual, or you can even use them in a group setting. It's going to be a great resource for you, and you'll really learn a lot. So check them out on Amazon. They'll be of real help to you. Now, we have started a new series on prophets and prophetic ministry, so let's get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about lessons that we can learn from the prophets of the Old Testament. Now, of course, we're not going to be able to cover this at all in one video, so it will take a few videos to just skim the surface. But today, we want to talk about Abraham. Did you realize that Abraham was a prophet? Oh, yes, he was. But the thing that we want to learn about Abraham is not only was he a powerful prophet of the Lord, very accurate in his prophetic ministry, but he also had some issues in his life. And that's what we want to learn today. Just because God calls somebody to an office of leadership doesn't mean that they're perfect. By no means. The only perfect person that ever has lived upon this earth is Jesus himself. Glory be to God. But if Jesus was only limited to using perfect people, he'd only be able to use himself, right? So the Lord picks people by his mercy, by his grace, and then he works in our lives to perfect us and make us more like himself. But it's a process. So let's look at how the Lord used Abraham, even though Abraham did have some issues. There was a time that Abraham lied, deceived, and he was a schemer just to save his own skin. Well, see, Abraham reveals to us that prophets aren't perfect. They can be true prophets of the Lord and still have major issues that the Lord needs to deal with. Let me read to you from Genesis chapter 20, verses 1 through 7. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned in Gerar. Now, this was a time that the land that Abraham was living in was suffering a famine, and so he moved himself, his family, his flocks down to Egypt, where they were at least not in a famine. When he got down there, the king, it says in verse 2, and Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Did you get that? Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." Now, technically, you could see that in his lineage that she was somewhat his half-sister, but still she was his wife. And the king, Abimelech of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." What was this? Abraham asked his wife, Sarah, to tell a lie and say, "Just tell them that you're my sister. Don't tell them you're my wife, or else they'll kill me in order to take you." And so we see that the king took Sarah to be his wife. He at that time had not had any relations with her, but she was on the road to becoming the wife of the king. And so the Lord intervened because he wanted to spare Abraham from making such a major mistake. Abraham did have some major issues in his character, lying, deceit, yet the Lord called him a prophet. So you see, the Lord doesn't call someone to be a prophet because that person is perfect. Understand this. Too many people, when they see a prophet that is accurate and flows in a powerful anointing, they begin to lift them up and put them on a pedestal and almost deify them. Oh no, don't do that. Look at them as an instrument that God is using, but that God is still working on to perfect them into the very image of Jesus. Let's learn from this. There's no perfect people but Jesus, even his prophets.